The implementation of the 18th Constitutional Amendment, which enforced the prohibition of alcoholic beverages, had profound effects on the United States during the 1920s. This decision led to a surge in violence and organized crime, as it fueled the rise of gangsters who engaged in illegal production and distribution of alcohol. Consequently, they gained control over various illicit activities such as prostitution and gambling, generating substantial profits. This era, often referred to as the Prohibition era, saw a significant increase in illicit alcohol production and distribution networks. Gangsters such as Al Capone became infamous for their involvement in bootlegging and other criminal enterprises. With the demand for alcohol remaining high despite its prohibition, organized crime syndicates flourished, exerting influence over entire communities and leading to a spike in violent conflicts between rival factions. Additionally, the prohibition of alcohol created a thriving underground economy centered around speakeasies, clandestine bars that operated covertly to serve alcohol to patrons. These establishments became hubs of social activity and rebellion against the restrictive laws of the time. Despite efforts to enforce prohibition through law enforcement and the establishment of agencies like the Bureau of Prohibition, the widespread availability of illegal alcohol persisted throughout the decade. The failure of Prohibition to achieve its intended goals ultimately led to its repeal with the passage of the 21st Amendment in 1933. This marked the end of one of the most tumultuous and controversial periods in American history, characterized by the unintended consequences of government intervention in regulating social behavior. According to sources from that period, the most famous gangster, known as Al Capone, earned the equivalent of $60 million annually from these illegal businesses, and by 1927 his personal wealth was estimated at more than $100 million. Over the years, Al Capone also imposed his influence on Chicago, dominating smuggling operations and the alcohol trade, and deliberately attacking and killing his rivals. According to police reports, the year 1924 witnessed 16 murders linked to gang disputes, and this number increased to reach 64 murders by the year 1929, the weakness that the FBI suffered at the time. In addition, the fiercest battles over influence in Chicago took place between Al Capone and George Bugs Moran, known as Bugs Moran, who led the Irish-American gang better known as the North Side Gang. During the 1920s, the two survived numerous assassination attempts, perhaps the most notable of which was the one to which Al Capone was subjected, when gunmen attacked him while he was eating dinner at the Cicero Hotel in Illinois and directed nearly 1,000 bullets at him before fleeing. Meanwhile, violence in Chicago reached its peak on February 14, 1929, corresponding to the annual day of St. Valentine, Valentine's Day, when one of the car repair shops that Bugs Moran exploited for smuggling purposes at 2122 North Clark Street witnessed a massacre that shook American public opinion, and forced the security authorities to move. During that day, a number of Al Capone's men arrived at this headquarters, wearing police uniforms, and forced 7 of Bugs Moran's top men to turn towards the wall before raining down a hail of bullets on them, killing them all. After the end of their mission, the gunmen fled without any trace of them being found. This operation, nicknamed the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, or the Valentine's Day Massacre, led to the killing of 7 of Bugs Moran's most important men, including Albert Kachelek, the gang's second-in-command, accountant Adam Heyer, and Frank Gusenberg. Gus Enberg, who struggled with death for hours, after being hit by 14 bullets, before he took his last breath, refusing to provide any information about the attack to the police. Meanwhile, Bugs Moran himself escaped death during this attack, as it was said that the attack targeted him personally, but he was not inside the warehouse when Al Capone's men entered. According to the testimonies of a number of bystanders, American investigators concluded that a number of gunmen impersonated security personnel and stormed the warehouse and pretended to arrest everyone inside before firing about 70 bullets, resulting in 7 deaths. On the other hand, Bugs Moran and his followers accused Al Capone of being behind the attack, but the latter refused, stressing that he was in Florida at the time of the massacre, thus allowing this crime to remain unpunished, and classified among the list of the largest crimes that the judiciary was unable to solve in the 20th century. While the Valentine's Day Massacre was considered the end of Al Capone's rivals in Chicago, many classified it as the beginning of the end for this man, who the press quickly dubbed Public Enemy Number 1. During the following period, the security authorities tightened their grip on Al Capone's activities before they were able to arrest him on charges of tax evasion. Following the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which marked a significant escalation in violence between rival gangs, particularly between Al Capone and Bugs Moran's North Side Gang, law enforcement agencies intensified their efforts to combat organized crime in Chicago. Despite Al Capone's denial of involvement in the massacre, public outrage and pressure on law enforcement agencies to apprehend those responsible intensified. However, the investigation faced significant challenges, including the lack of credible witnesses willing to testify against Capone and the sophisticated methods employed by his criminal organization to evade detection. In the aftermath of the massacre, Al Capone continued to exert control over illicit activities in Chicago, but the increased scrutiny from law enforcement and mounting legal troubles began to take their toll on his operations. The press dubbed Capone Public Enemy Number 1, further increasing public scrutiny and putting pressure on authorities to bring him to justice. Ultimately, it was charges of tax evasion that led to Capone's downfall. In 1931, he was indicted and convicted on multiple counts of tax evasion and sentenced to prison. His imprisonment marked the end of an era of rampant criminality and violence associated with Prohibition-era gangsters like Capone. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre remains one of the most notorious crimes of the 20th century, emblematic of the lawlessness and brutality that characterized the Prohibition era in the United States. It serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of Prohibition and the challenges faced by law enforcement in combating organized crime.